This is GFree Radio. Here's your host, Peter Stewart.
The GFree Radio Show. Hello, I'm Peter Stewart. This is episode 23. We are rocking with Oodies this week. So, after all the tweets, the talk, the expos and the adverts, Oodies finally launching in the UK this past week. And we've got an exclusive interview with their MD talking about the brand, their move into the British market and their plans for the future. More stores? More countries? What about prescription items? Simon Hazlett speaks to us in the first of our two-part interview with him. Also in part one, the scientists who've got a grant to develop reduced-gluten grains, and a couple of seemingly outrageous claims, one that cannabis may treat celiac disease, and the other that a gadget attached to your smartphone could detect gluten in any meal. Interesting stuff. In part two of this episode, our interview is with Nikki Everett, who runs one of the local chapters of the American group ROC. That's Raising Our Celiac Kids. And as the name implies, they give support and education to young people with CD and also their families. Hear about how Nikki came to set up the group in North Carolina, about the events they hold, and also, crucially, the coping mechanisms they teach the youngsters so they can get through their daily lives living G-free. Oh, and linked with that, we've got a few more ideas about helping young people with celiac disease, including news of an event in the UK next month. Plus, in part two, we also hear about the free-from edition of the cooking challenge show, The Great British Bake Off, including one of those G-free recipes. We bring you part of the article in a recent issue of Vogue magazine entitled Is True Happiness Possible Without Gluten? And an intriguing new G-free product in the Marks and Spencer stores. It's something we've not even really thought about before. Certainly we've never seen it G-free before. We think this might be a first. All that and more in the G-free Radio Show. So you're very welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us and our exclusive interview about Oodies, part one of that coming up in part one in a few moments' time. First of all, a little bit of G-free news over the past 7 days or so. Arcadia Biosciences has got a $2 million award to develop reduced gluten grains. Don't know how you feel about tinkering with different grains and so on to reduce the gluten in them when there are already gluten-free grains around. How do you feel about that? Would you eat a reduced gluten grain that has been developed? Anyway, the award is from the National Institute of Health's Diabetes and Digestive and Kidney Disorders Institute in the United States. This story coming out of bizjournals.com. Quote, concern about the health effects of gluten is of increasing importance to global consumers and is a rapidly growing market for food manufacturers, as according to Arcadia Biosciences President and CEO Eric Ray. The goal of our reduced gluten grains research program is to develop wholesome grains that provide a wider range of food choices for people with gluten intolerance and celiac disease. So Arcadia's research will seek genetic variants of cereal grains with naturally reduced gluten. As I say, how do you feel about eating something that's been developed? Tinkered with, perhaps. Anyway, next week we'll start a mini-series looking at some of those different grains which are naturally gluten-free and where they are being grown at the moment, and also a little bit more about those as well. So that's a new series starting next week. And also in the news this week, cannabis may treat celiac disease according to a recent government-published study. This is from thejointblog.com. You get the inference in the word joint. The National Institute of Health study published found that cannabis may treat celiac disease by activating the body's natural cannabinoid receptors. The study, which was conducted by researchers at the Department of Biomedical Sciences at the University of Teramo in Italy, aimed to investigate the expression of cannabinoid receptors at transcriptional and translational levels in the duodenal mucosa of untreated celiac patients on a gluten-free diet for at least 12 months, and control subjects. Also, biopsies from treated celiac patients cultured ex vivo with peptic tryptic digest of gliadin were investigated. Me neither, which is why I'll repeat again the headline: cannabis may treat celiac disease according to a government-published study. And as I say, if you want to read more about that, you can read that report in its entirety going via thejointblog.com. So, the big news in the celiac world in the UK this week was the long-awaited launch of the huge US GF brand Oodies. We've got an exclusive interview with their managing director, Simon Hazlett. So, over this week and next, hear about their range of products now and later, where you can get them now and later, their expansion plans in the UK and abroad. I also ask about whether Oodies items could soon be seen on prescription, courtesy of the National Health Service here in the UK. So, you saw the stand at Europe's largest free-from show in London in June. You've read the tweets. You may even have hunted down and tasted their food in the last 7 days or so. Now, let's hear from the MD of Oodies, Simon Hazlett.
The launch day has basically been ensuring all the products in store, a few store visits, speaking with some of the store managers, and doing a quick quality test on all of the product that we've done some sample purchases on.
Okay, now that sounds good because we'll come a bit more to where you are and what the product range is in a few moments' time. First of all, let's back up a little bit and talk about the brand itself, because this is an American brand, isn't it? Give us a little bit of the background.
Sure, yes, it is an American brand. It's the largest brand in the States and Canada, and it's also the fastest growing brand in the States and Canada. Very pleased to say that we also own the second biggest brand in the States and Canada, called Glutino. So all in all, we have approximately between 150 and 175 products between the two brands listed in the States and Canada, all of which we have the choice to bring over to the UK under the one single brand, Oodies.
That sounds huge. Sorry, 170 odd different items in the brand. Wow.
Yeah, so the real unique point of difference with Oodies, I suppose, in the States, is it is a cross-category representation. So every different type of subcategory within gluten-free and free-from, we have a strong presence. Okay,
now I was actually going to ask a little bit more about the brand, but you've got me on this track now, because this is fascinating. I didn't realise. I knew you were big. I knew you were number one over there in North America, but I didn't realise how many different products you had. So essentially, anything made out of gluten, you can do gluten-free, it sounds like.
Yes, within reason. But obviously, we've got a constant string of MPD and innovation. What we're trying to do is come up with a complete solution. So anything from breakfast to lunchtime to evening time to snacking solutions, something which I really think the UK market is lacking currently.
Now, again, just to put this into perspective from another viewpoint, I mean, I guess some of the biggest ranges at the moment in the UK are actually the supermarket-owned brands, which are obviously, I guess, subcontracted through other food manufacturers. And I would guess, I mean, I've just been to Sainsbury's, for example, and I would guess their range is maybe 30, 40 different items. So you've got 3-4 times that amount, just to put that in perspective.
Yes, obviously we haven't got plans straight away to bring everything to the
Sure.
UK market. Obviously what works in the US won't necessarily work in the UK, but clearly we've targeted a range of 19 products to bring to the UK for the first launch. I've got a range of approximately 50 products which I'll be looking to bring to the UK in 2014, and then we'll have to see from there.
Okay, so we won't list every single product. We actually did that last week, in fact. But you are going after the basic bread market as well to start off with, aren't you?
That's right. So although we pride ourselves in, I'll talk about the three pillars to the business, first of all. So quality, above everything else, so taste is king. Innovation. So when we talk about innovation, they're first-to-market products, some of the range, not just another type of bread, and the width of range, as we've already covered. But when we start looking at the types of bread, for instance, we've got a twist in that our bread will be the first gluten-free bread launched as a low-fat product, so it will be below 3% fat. When you compare that with some of the offerings that currently on the market tend to range anywhere between 5 and up to 14% fat.
So obviously the basic loaf is a very difficult market to get into, especially over here, of course, with a huge Genius brand, but you've identified a point of difference.
Absolutely. And so it's two types of bread. a white and a brown loaf, as I said, a low-fat variety, so below 3% fat. We've got 2 different types of rolls. We've got another first-to-market line. We're doing 3 different varieties of bagel. We're doing a cinnamon raisin, a savoury bagel, which is an onion-flavoured bagel, a plain bagel, and we're also doing a mixed pack of muffins. So we're doing a toffee and chocolate chip variety.
OK, and just tease us with a couple of things which could be further down the line, which are already around in the US that could be coming to the UK soon.
Something very similar to the sandwich cream cookies, something similar to Oreos. We're looking at frozen meal solutions. And I can't tell you about the bakery items, unfortunately. They're top secret at the minute. But,
OK.
All I can say is they're worth waiting for.
OK. Now, let's talk about whereabouts you are at the moment. So you're in Tesco's at the moment. That must have been, well, an easy decision for them to have made, but only in one supermarket at the moment. So are you going to be loyal to them? Do you stay with them, or do you expand into other supermarkets?
Well, the idea is obviously to give the consumers the best possible choice. Tesco are a value partner of ours, but we are, of course, still looking for other retailers to bring on board in 2014.
OK, and what about prescriptions? Because, again, that's another very valuable market to get into.
Yeah, once again, we are looking at that route. I think we're just concentrating, first of all, of getting the launch correct, making sure we do things properly. But certainly it is on our radar for later on.
And I can almost guess the answer to this as well then, judging by the answer to the last 2, which is understandable. You're keeping your powder a little dry at this stage. But a couple of years, I guess, after Genius launched, you started seeing their bread being used in some of the high street cafes, in the rolls and the sandwiches and so on. Are you likely to be going down that route with the Starbucks, Cafe Nero's and so on?
Yeah, once again, in the States, we've had very strong growth in the food service category. It's something that we're looking to replicate in the UK. Our business model is very simple. We're looking to replicate exactly how the US have had success and Canada have had success. And that comes down to grassroots marketing, comes down to a lot of hard work, a lot of communication with our social and digital media. For instance, Udi's, I'm not sure if you're aware, have over 1 million Facebook fans. But certainly that the food service sector is something that we're very keen to get into, but will once again be phase 2 in 2014.
And we'll hear more from Simon in next week's programme. And you know what? I've gone out and bought some Udi's bagels. First of all, the cinnamon and raisin ones, and also their savoury ones, which are with apple, and also the muffins as well. As we always say, if we're going to do a taste test or recommend anything in any way, shape or form, if we're paid to do that, we will tell you. So these were bought with our own budget, our own money, and that is very good, actually. That is very good. That's an honest opinion of the cinnamon and raisin bagel. That's very, very pleasant indeed. In fact, in the store that I went, well, it's got to be Tesco's, isn't it? That's the only place that sells them. Excuse me while I'm talking with mouthful. Very rude. Do apologise. You could smell the cinnamon in the air, actually at the store shelf. I was a bit concerned. Did that mean that maybe the bags weren't airtight enough, and maybe that was going to change the flavour a little bit, make them a little bit stale? But no, they're really good, really light, and very, very tasty indeed. So I'm sure you'll make up your own mind. Of course, other foods, other bagels and so on are available. And talking about that, incidentally, more from Simon next week. Did I say that? More about that. I notice in the new edition of the Coeliac UK Cross Grain magazine for the autumn-winter, that their magazine comes out, a couple of 3 times a year. Our programme comes out every week, of course. That Sainsbury's is saying they've got 12 new free-from products available for the Christmas period. So that's going to be interesting. Doesn't say what they are. You can order those online and get them in store from October. So that sounds interesting. There's a double-page spread for that company just mentioned, beginning with U. And also, if I flick through, There's other adverts indeed for Morrison's and Asda, who are all trying to push their gluten-free range. Genius in there, Nature's Path and so on. Now, where is it? I'm trying to... Here we go. So make sure that you look at this particular advert, which is towards the back of the magazine, actually, on page 58. And this is a brand new range of gluten-free and dairy-free mixes called Seriously Good. Catering for guests with special diets has just become easier because they're from award-winning chef Phil Vickery, and he's teamed up with Squire's Kitchen to create exclusive new gluten and dairy-free mixes which are now available in 4 easy-to-use varieties. They are vanilla and raspberry cupcake mix, chocolate chunk cookie mix, very lemony cupcake mix, and double chocolate fancy cake mix. They sound good. They don't sound particularly different from what you can get elsewhere. But it's really interesting that Phil Vickery is behind this. If you're out of the country and you're not aware of Phil Vickery, is one of the UK's celebrity chefs, and married to who was the Queen of Daytime TV for several years. And Phil Vickery has been a great supporter of the celiac movement here in the UK. So it's really interesting to see that he's putting his name to some of those mixes. Hopefully that's not going to compromise the rest of his celiac work. And you know what? I've just put down the magazine, and on the back, an advert from Glutafin, who reckon that they have come up with puff pastry. Now, when was the last time you had gluten-free puff pastry? Looking at the picture, not exactly puff pastry, but it's doing a pretty good job of it. That's really, really interesting. So that's Glutafin. Okay, let's move on before we run out of time for part 1 of the GFree radio show for this particular week, episode 23. This is intriguing. I'm not entirely sure whether to take this with a pinch of salt or what. You'll see what I mean when I read this to you. This comes from engadget.com, engadget.com. Some of us can't eat gluten. Others need to stay away from certain fats. Mealtimes can be incredibly stressful for people with dietary restrictions, especially when dining out, since manufacturers aren't always required to report all ingredients, specifically when dealing with trace amounts. At the moment, I'm just reading what it says here. I know things are changing. With frequent inaccuracies, counting calories is a whole nother ballgame. A pocketable device, their word not mine, pocketable, interesting, a pocketable device called TellSpec may be an affordable solution for breaking down the ingredients in our meals consistently and wherever we eat. The device is essentially a miniature spectrometer. That's a device that can analyse materials, ingredients in this case, by measuring properties of light. The gadget sends a list of ingredients and nutrition info to a companion smartphone app, making it easy to evaluate food quickly and efficiently. There's not much more than that. It does go on to say, if you eat to live, this gadget seems like a fit. It's set to ship next August with pre-orders available for $150. And that's interesting. So essentially what it seems to be, and there's a little video attached to that as well, it's a probe which seems to fit into the palm of your hand. It's about the size of a credit card by the looks of it, with a button, and I guess you push something into, in this case, it's a chocolate truffle, I notice, and that then beams back via the spectrometer device the information on the nutritional content back to your smartphone. So you can tell if it's got gluten in. I mean, it specifically mentions gluten there. So that sounds intriguing, doesn't it? And it says, is this using science or magic? Not entirely sure. Interesting stuff. Now, finally, last week we heard from our correspondents at the ICDS 2013, Amy and Erica, of course, about a session debunking celiac myths. And I just wondered how many of these you're going to get right. I'll give you the answers in part 2. How many of these are you going to get it right? Here we go. Number 1.
1.
Celiac disease is rare.
2.
Celiac disease is a food allergy.
3.
You have to have gut symptoms such as diarrhea to have celiac disease.
4.
Only children get celiac disease. That one's pretty straightforward, isn't it?
5.
You have to be underweight to have undiagnosed celiac disease.
6,
You can grow out of having celiac disease.
7,
A breadcrumb won't hurt someone with celiac disease. Some of these are quite obvious, aren't they? But are you sure you know the answers to all of these? And
8,
celiac disease only affects people of European origin. What do you reckon to those? Hit or myth? Fact or fiction or fallacy? As I say, give you the answers in part 2, because that is the end of part 1 of the GFree radio show. Join us in part 2. Don't go anywhere else, because let's just give you a quick reminder of what in fact is coming up in part 2. Our interview is with Nikki Everett, who runs one of the local chapters of the American group Rock, Raising Our Celiac Kids. They give support and education to young people with CD and also their families as well. And we've got some other information and advice about young people with celiac disease as well, including news of an event in the UK next month. We also hear about the free-from edition of the cooking challenge show, The Great British Bake Off, an article in a magazine in the past few days called Is True Happiness Possible Without Gluten? And another new product, this one I've never seen anywhere else ever in all my born days, that's gluten-free. I'm intrigued. It sounds different. It sounds fantastic. Well done, Marks and Spencers. And I'll tell you what that is in part 2.